I woke up to a flood in my lower pasture. The HOA's sprinklers had ruptured my irrigation canal, drenching my fields. Their manicured lawns were thriving, but at my expense. And that's when I realized every drop of their water ran straight through my land. My name is Alex Mercer, and I'm 34 years old. Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of owning land so vast that the horizon felt endless, where the wind could whisper through trees without anyone listening, and where a man could work with his hands and see tangible results. That dream became reality when I bought a 1,000-acre farm on the outskirts of a suburban HOA community. The property stretches across rolling hills dotted with groves of oak and maple, winding creeks that sparkle in the sunlight, and pastures ready for cattle or crops. The farmhouse itself is modest but warm, with a wraparound porch where I can watch mist rise over the fields at dawn. Every corner of this land tells a story. The remnants of old stone fences, wildflowers reclaiming abandoned plots, and the quiet hum of life that thrives without interference. Just a mile south lies the HOA neighborhood, a stark contrast. Identical houses lined up like clockwork, manicured lawns glistening under constant sprinkler schedules, and the faint mechanical buzz of lawn equipment in harmony. From my porch, I can see the boundary fence, a thin line separating wilderness from order, chaos from control. This farm isn't just my property. It's my sanctuary, a place I've poured sweat, vision, and patience into. And yet, the closer I get to peace, the more I realize that suburban ambition has its own quiet, insidious reach, and it's creeping closer. The HOA president is Linda Fairchild, a woman in her early 50s with sharp features, meticulously styled hair, and a presence that commands attention before she even speaks. From the moment I met her, I sensed there was more lurking beneath her polished exterior. She greeted me with a tight-lipped smile and the kind of perfect manners that feel rehearsed, as if civility were armor for something darker underneath. Linda has an obsessive streak, particularly about appearances and control. She carries a clipboard everywhere, jotting notes even during casual conversations, and speaks with the precision of someone who believes every word carries weight. At HOA gatherings, she extols the virtues of community standards, but her compliments often have a sting. Thinly veiled judgments about property lines, landscaping choices, or whether a fence is up to code. There's a subtle thrill in the way she monitors neighbors, a vigilance that borders on intimidation. Her obsession with water management is especially unsettling. She lectures about sprinklers, irrigation schedules, and water conservation like sermons, never missing an opportunity to point out minor infractions. Despite her charm, or perhaps because of it, I feel an undercurrent of tension every time I'm around her. The perfect lawns she adores aren't just about aesthetics. They're about power. And I know that sooner or later, my untamed acres are going to clash with her carefully controlled vision, and the quiet tension between us will erupt. One morning, I noticed my lower pasture was damp in places it shouldn't be, puddles forming where the soil should have been firm. At first, I shrugged it off, blaming a heavy night of rain or a burst irrigation pipe. But over the next week, the anomalies multiplied. My creek ran lower upstream, my irrigation channels were muddied, and certain sections of my field seemed parched while their lawns thrived, unnaturally green under the glaring sun. Then came the day I discovered the valves. They had been tampered with, slightly twisted, rerouted, and attached to hoses that snaked toward the HOA properties. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had deliberately diverted my water to sustain their perfect lawns. My heart pounded as I traced a faint trail of footprints in the mud, leading toward the HOA's maintenance shed. And then, the audacity of it all. One afternoon, I spotted Linda herself, clipboard in hand, overseeing a small crew at the canal. They were attaching hoses directly to my irrigation gates, their actions precise, practiced, and unapologetic. The hiss of water redirected into their sprinklers filled the air like a mocking anthem. I stormed over. "This is my land," I shouted, voice shaking with anger. "You can't just steal my water." Linda turned slowly, eyes cool, calculating. "We're protecting the neighborhood," she said smoothly. "Your property isn't our concern." Her words stung, and in that instant I understood. This wasn't negligence or a mistake. It was a calculated act of control, a subtle yet ruthless assertion of power. Standing there, watching her and her crew prioritize their lawns over my thriving fields, I knew I couldn't let this go. Not quietly, not ever. After that confrontation, sleep became a stranger. Every night I replayed the image of Linda, clipboard clutched like a weapon, her crew obediently siphoning water from my land as if I were invisible. I knew I needed answers, and proof. Not just to confront her, but to ensure that, legally, she could never claim dominance over something that was rightfully mine. I started with county records. Late nights hunched over a flickering laptop revealed every boundary, easement, and historical water right tied to my property. That's when the first spark of hope ignited. The HOA had no legal claim to any of my irrigation channels or creeks. Every drop of water flowing toward their lawns originated entirely on my land. There was no ambiguity, no gray area. They were trespassing. Next, I mapped the entire water network, tracing the channels from my upper pastures to the HOA sprinklers. I took photos of valves and pipes, documenting evidence of tampering and repeated interference. Time-stamped images captured the steady flow of water, diverted without authorization. Each picture, each map, strengthened the case that Linda and her board were knowingly exploiting my property. I contacted a real estate attorney experienced in rural water rights. "This isn't just a minor violation," she said, voice tight with disbelief. "They've been siphoning water illegally, and you have documentation. You could pursue civil action, and a court would almost certainly side with you." Then came the local authorities. The County Water Management Office confirmed that unauthorized diversion of private water is a serious offense. Even the town clerk was intrigued when I brought in the detailed maps, noting that homeowners often underestimated how jurisdiction over water works, and that ignorance wouldn't protect them. By the end of the week, I had a strategy. Armed with proof, expert counsel, and a clear understanding of the law, I could confront Linda and the HOA in a way they couldn't ignore. I felt a mixture of anger and exhilaration. Finally, the tables were turning. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was preparing to expose a system of control and entitlement that had been hidden behind pristine lawns and polished smiles. Every late night, as I walked my pastures and listened to the wind through the oaks, I realized something vital. This fight wasn't just about water. It was about asserting ownership, respect, and the principle that no one gets to manipulate what's yours without consequence. And I was ready to make them pay attention. The day of the confrontation, I arrived early at the HOA's annual board meeting, my folder heavy with evidence, maps, photos, and time-stamped documentation of the water diversion. The room smelled of polished wood, faint perfume, and the subtle antiseptic scent of overused conference chairs. Board members mingled politely, unaware that this gathering was about to erupt into something far bigger than routine bylaws or landscaping debates. Linda walked in last, perfectly composed as always, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown to disaster. Her clipboard was clutched in front of her, fingers tapping the edge in impatient anticipation. She smiled at the attendees, but her gaze landed on me, calculating, measuring, like a chess player recognizing an unexpected move on the board. I cleared my throat. "Linda," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, "we need to talk about the irrigation system." Her smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, tilting her head with practiced politeness, her voice smooth and icy. I slammed the folder on the table. "Every sprinkler, every irrigation line, every drop of water you've been using, it comes from my property. I have documented proof of every diversion, tampering, and unauthorized connection." A murmur ran through the room. Heads turned. Board members whispered, eyebrows rising. The tension thickened, palpable like static in the air before a storm. Linda's eyes narrowed, her composure cracking. "You can't just—" she started, but I cut her off. "Actually, I can," I said firmly, spreading maps across the table. "And legally, I will. Unauthorized diversion of private water is not a minor infraction. It's trespassing. Civil action is imminent if this continues." The room went silent. You could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Linda's hands clenched the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. I watched her mask of control slip, the rehearsed smile faltering, revealing the thin line between confidence and panic. One of the homeowners leaned forward, whispering, "Is that true? All this water comes from his land?" "Yes," I said, letting the weight of it sink in. "Every drop. And now, the HOA has to account for it." Linda's voice finally broke, tight and forced. "This is ridiculous." I met her gaze, unwavering. "The evidence isn't ridiculous, and neither is the law." The tension in the room was electric, the air thick with anticipation. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was the tipping point. The quiet, controlled world Linda had built was crumbling under the undeniable proof that the balance of power had shifted. And everyone in the room could see it. The fallout from the confrontation was immediate and undeniable. The next HOA board meeting had every homeowner packed into the small community hall, buzzing with curiosity, whispers, and the faint hum of ceiling fans. Linda arrived first, flawless as always, but the confidence in her stride was gone. Her clipboard no longer seemed like armor. It was a prop in a story she was losing. I stepped to the front, spreading my maps, photos, and time-stamped documentation across the podium. The room fell silent as I began to speak. Your lawns, your fountains, your so-called perfect irrigation. It all comes from my property. Without my land, your green paradise is impossible. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Homeowners leaned forward, eyes wide, scanning the evidence. I could see recognition dawning. The HOA's supposed authority was built on borrowed water, stolen without accountability. Linda tried to interrupt. "This is outrageous. You will listen," I said firmly, "and understand the consequences." By the end of the meeting, the board had no choice. Linda received an official reprimand recorded in the meeting minutes, was fined for unauthorized use of private property, and had to formally acknowledge her violations publicly. Homeowners looked on, some shocked, some relieved, as she stood rigidly, cheeks flushed, realizing the control she had clung to so tightly was gone. For a symbolic gesture, I rerouted the main irrigation canal so a small, sparkling stream flowed past the HOA properties, glinting in the sunlight. It was a reminder. Their lush lawns were only possible because of my land, and now they had to respect the source. After the meeting, walking back across my pasture, the wind rustling through the tall grass, I felt a rare, deep satisfaction. The farm wasn't just protected, it had asserted its own authority. Linda's attempt to dominate, manipulate, and control had been undone, not with malice, but with undeniable evidence and a clear demonstration of rights. As I watched sunlight shimmer across the creek, I realized the payoff was more than legal. It was poetic. Ownership is respect. Respect is power. And sometimes, the quietest corners of the world remind the loudest voices that boundaries exist for a reason. And in that moment, my farm had spoken louder than any boardroom argument ever could. What would you do if your neighbor was secretly stealing something as vital as water from your land? Would you fight back legally, negotiate, or confront them directly? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your strategies and experiences. And if you enjoy uncovering these high-stakes neighborhood dramas, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more jaw-dropping HOA revenge stories. Don't miss the next one. It's coming soon.